Heimo and Edna Korth have chosen a life that few could endure, a life in the brutal, unforgiving wilderness of Alaska's Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. For over 40 years, they have relied on their skills, instincts, and each other to survive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. But their journey is not just one of resilience. It is also marked by profound heartbreak. Behind the stunning landscapes and self-sufficient lifestyle lies a story of unimaginable loss. What tragedy nearly broke them? And why, after everything, do they still refuse to leave the land that has given them so much, yet taken even more? To understand their story, we must go back to the beginning. Heimo Korth was not born into this life. He grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, in a family that was not particularly outdoorsy. His father worked in a factory, providing a stable but predictable life. Heimo tried that life too, working in a factory himself, but it never felt right. From a young age, he was drawn to the wild. While other kids played in the suburbs, he explored the nearby fields and woods, often alone. By the time he was a teenager, the call of the wilderness was too strong to ignore. In 1973, at just 18 years old, Heimo left Wisconsin for Canada's Northwest Territories, chasing his dream of living in the wild. This was during the Vietnam War, and many assumed he was dodging the draft. Despite the challenges, he was determined to carve out a life in the wilderness. His first job was as an assistant to a hunting guide, but the pay was meager and he struggled to survive. Eventually, he had to return to Wisconsin, but the wilderness never stopped calling him. Then he got a break. A job in Alaska working for a guide who hunted big game in the Brooks Range. At 20 years old, Heimo stepped into the Alaskan wilderness for good, and he never looked back. He learned to trap and survive in one of the most brutal environments on Earth, proving he could not only survive, but thrive. After years of searching, he found a place along the Colleen River, a remote area deep in Alaska's wilderness, where he could trap fur and make a living. It was during this time that Heimo met Edna. Born into the Yupik community, Edna was raised with the skills to hunt, fish, and survive off the land. Her uncle, Jackson Mokiuk, was a master trapper who taught her everything she knew. When Heimo arrived in her village, he quickly became part of the community, learning from Jackson and growing close to Edna's family. Over time, Heimo and Edna's relationship blossomed, and they married in 1982. Together they built a life in the wilderness, relying on each other and the land to survive. They had no running water, no electricity, and no connection to the outside world. Every fall they hunted and trapped, stocking up for the long, brutal winters. But their life was not without tragedy. Before meeting Heimo, Edna had already experienced deep loss. She had been engaged to a Swedish biologist with whom she had 2 children, Melinda and Merlin, but her fiancé died in a plane crash, leaving her to raise their children alone. Her next relationship was fraught with difficulties, and her uncle was wary of Heimo at first, wanting to ensure he would treat Edna well. In time, Heimo proved himself, and they welcomed their first daughter together, Colleen, named after the Colleen River. Colleen was full of life and curiosity, but tragedy struck when she disappeared in a canoeing accident just 5 days after her 2nd birthday. Her body was never found. The grief was crushing, but Heimo and Edna chose to stay in the wilderness, honoring Colleen's memory by continuing to live in the land she had loved. Despite their loss, they carried on, welcoming 2 more daughters, Rhonda and Kryn. They created family traditions like visiting the mountain where they had placed a wooden cross in Colleen's memory. Over the years, their story gained attention. In 1992, they were featured in Braving Alaska, a National Geographic documentary. Later, their lives were chronicled in James Campbell's book, The Final Frontiersman, and they became central figures in the TV series The Last Alaskans. The show, which ran for 4 seasons, offered an unfiltered look at their lives in the wilderness. It captured not only their resilience and resourcefulness, but also their heartbreak, including the loss of Colleen. Unlike other reality shows, The Last Alaskan stayed true to real life, showcasing the challenges and joys of living off the grid in one of the most remote places on Earth. Today, Heimo and Edna remain in their remote cabin, trapping and living off the land. Their children and grandchildren visit, but the wilderness is their true home. Heimo, now in his late 60s, continues to trap wolves, wolverines, and other animals, earning a reputation as one of the best trappers in North America. Edna sews their winter gear by hand, crafting heavy-duty parkas and gloves to protect them from the brutal cold. Their life is not easy, but it is the life they have chosen. For Heimo, the wilderness is the only place that has ever felt like home. Despite the hardships and heartbreak, he and Edna remain committed to the land that has shaped them. Their story is one of resilience, love, and an unbreakable bond with the wild.